Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the third day of the India Ideas Conclave 2022. For the first session this morning, we have with us a media panel. May I request our speaker, Abhijit Chavda, astrophysicist, onto the stage, please. Abhijit Chavda ji, may I request you onto the stage. I also invite Kushal Mehra from Charvaka podcast onto the stage, please. Welcome, sir. May I request Praveen Chaturvedi, CEO of Prashyam Studio, onto the stage, please. I invite Dr. Shashi Shekhar, CEO of Prasar Bharati, onto the stage. Welcome, sir. Request you to conduct the proceedings and hand it over to you, sir.
Good morning. I think it's a very pleasant weather here in Bangalore compared to Delhi, where I've come from. Very happy to have an excellent panel this morning. I think the media landscape has seen dramatic changes, and I think it continues to evolve very fast. We went from an era of Doordarshan and All India Radio being the only sources of electronic media. Today, practically every one of us is a media source with our smartphones, being able to create content, publish content, and disseminate it. I think what we are seeing with the meta era is this is perhaps going to the next level, where there will perhaps be a far more virtual reality-based consumption of media. I'm already seeing that with my children. They no longer read newspaper, they don't watch television, they don't listen to radio. Their sources of news are perhaps from Twitch or Fortnite or God knows what new app that is doing the rounds. So we are seeing a completely different landscape for the future of media, future of content. And what does that mean to all of us? And I think that's perhaps a very pertinent question. So maybe we can go around, starting with you, sir, with your perhaps a brief introduction and your thoughts on the subject.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is Abhijit. I'm a physicist, and I'm also a YouTuber these days. So when we think of media, we typically think of the entertainment industry and the news industry. But media has taken lots of forms over the millennia. It's been rock carvings, it's been newspapers, it's been libraries, and much more. Now, an interesting transformation happened in the 18th and 19th centuries when the first newspapers came out. So before that, whatever information was stored, encoded in the media was the most valuable and important information that a society would have. That's what was transmitted in various forms of media. In the 19th century onwards, you had newspapers because apparently people needed to know what's happening all across the world. And you had things like pulp fiction, entertainment in the form of writing and so on. So things changed in the 19th century onwards. The information that was being transmitted became less important, less valuable in the long term, but it became scalable, it became monetizable. So media became a big business. You could make millions, billions, trillions of dollars if you had a media company. And eventually, obviously, we had the advent of radio, of gramophone records, of movies, of television, and much more. That's the 20th century landscape. So that is what we now call legacy media. And because of this widespread nature of media, it became a very influential thing. Politicians understood it immediately. So media essentially became an influence operation. Hollywood is an influence operation. It's an American influence operation. The USSR defeated the Nazis in continental Europe, but we all think it's the Americans who did it because they saved Private Ryan. So that's the kind of influence media has, entertainment has, and so does the news industry as well. Now, in the 21st century, things have changed. Obviously, from the 90s onwards, the internet became a thing. Initially, we had Web 1.0, flat HTML and CSS static websites. Then you had the advent of Google search. Then you had YouTube. And then you had interactive websites. So the end users became the content creators. That's what started happening. And that's how a lot of metadata was generated, which is all now being mined by the big data companies. They have been doing this for the past 20 years. And today, the media landscape is very different. We are entering the meta era in 2022. So a handful of very large monopolistic American companies have decided to transform the world. And that's where we are at today. Now, who is the target of this? I mean, we can unpack this in great detail, but they are laser focused on the next generation, on Generation Z and Generation Alpha, which is essentially the kids of today, the children, the teenagers, 15 years old, 13-year-old kids, even the 8 to 10-year-olds, and even the toddlers. That's whom they are investing in. It's a huge investment they're making. And there are certain characteristics that all of these kids have in common. Firstly, they were all born in an era where you have 24/7 access to good internet. Secondly, they all have access since birth to smart devices. And thirdly, they all have been exposed since their birth to streaming services. So that's the kind of world they have been born in. It's the kind of world we would not have imagined when we were born, when we were growing up. So they are living, essentially, these kids, in a whole different universe, which is very different from ours. Their entire brains and everything is wired differently. And that is the target. That is the demographic that the meta era is targeting. And that is what they're going to monetize. So it is a big challenge. There is no concept of national sovereignty in the meta era, and that brings up a whole lot of challenges. They talk about, I mean, it is a challenge. They talk about inclusivity, diversity, etc. But as we know on social media, where is the diversity of opinions? Opinions are supposed to be one-dimensional and monochromatic. Even Indian government officials, sitting members of parliament, etc., have been targeted, bullied. They've been forced to take down posts. So there is no diversity of opinions that is allowed on the internet. And the reason for this is that all of these companies come from one country, the United States, and they will obviously propagate a certain point of view. The world is a beautiful place because of diversity and localism. If you go to various countries, you will find very beautiful manifestations of local culture, lifestyle, all that. But if you have a monochromatic, monocultural world, it's going to make the world a very boring and dull and drab and lifeless place. But that's the threat that we will face when a single entity, essentially, the metaverse, takes over the whole world. So that is one of the threats that we will be facing. And of course, it's going to be a threat for every individual country's culture, way of life, and much more. So if they target the youngsters, see, they will sell it to us in a different way. They will tell us that you can wear these wonderful VR headsets, and you can sit in your bedroom and interact with people 1,000 miles away as if you're in the same office. That's wonderful. They'll tell you that your kids can learn so quickly and absorb so much information very fast. Wonderful. So that's how they are selling it to us. But the actual intent is to monetize the youngsters. It's to hook them into it. They've been iteratively improving upon the algorithms of how to constantly trigger the dopamine center of the brain so that kids get hooked to it. And you know, if you look at the lives of kids today, they are hooked on games like, on platforms like Roblox, and Minecraft and various other games, GTA, etc. So these people have iteratively improved the algorithms, and that's how they're able to hook kids into it. So the hope essentially is that the new generations, Generation Z, Generation Alpha, and onwards, will be totally hooked to the metaverse. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, what problem is the metaverse solving? What real world problem is it solving? Is it solving world hunger? Is it solving climate change? Is it solving cancer? Is it finding us a new vaccine for dengue, which nobody has ever found? It's not solving any big problems. It's trying to addict us, hook us into a certain lifestyle. And the fact is that with great power comes great power and no responsibility. The only responsibility these big corporations have is to their shareholders, firstly, and secondly, to their governments. Or vice versa, whichever way it works. They have no responsibility to the end user beyond what is contained in the big wall of legal text. So there is no responsibility, and their only intention is to make money and profit their shareholders and also serve as geopolitical agents of influence for the government. The Indian national interest does not figure in this, neither does the French national interest or any other national interest. So this is a big challenge going forward for every country which still has an independent foreign policy. And the solution to that is oversight and regulation. So that's what I can say about this. I'll keep it brief. I will hand the baton back to Sir.
So, as he says, with great power comes only power, no responsibility. How do you see it as a content creator? How do you see this whole landscape evolving?
Well, I'll actually focus on the content landscape itself. So I was thinking on 3 lines, right? First is complementarity. So usually what happens is there is this mindset in content creation that the new era of media that is going to be unleashed is, you'll hear lines like breaking the shackles, smashing the old order. I really don't see it that way. I see it more as a complementarity issue that maybe there is, so I'll give you an example. There is a very, very big media personality who primarily deals on YouTube. His name is Tim Pool in the United States of America. He's a very well-known journalist. He's done ground reports. He's gone down on the ground and done it. But Tim Pool has a chicken feed channel where he has a chicken farm where he goes and collects the eggs out of his chicken, and he has thousands of people watching his chicken feed. So the point is that you could say that if you only watch Tim Pool on one side, you'll be like, yeah, Tim Pool taking on CNN, Tim Pool taking on X, Tim Pool. But it's not really the case. Today, what has happened and what's going to happen, in my view, is going to be a case where, so originally what used to happen, let's take Twitter as an example. Usually what used to happen was what mainstream media discusses becomes a hashtag or a trend on social media, and then everybody starts talking about it. But now things have changed. Now there are many occasions where something shot by someone through their cell phone in some remote corner of the world, it doesn't even have to be about India. Like, we seem to have opinions on everything, and it's not necessarily that bad. And we start talking about it, and then because we are talking about it, the mainstream picks it up because, well, there are too many people here who seem to be interested in it. So I think it's a role of complementarity and not combat. I think a lot of times people confuse it and they say, no, that's group A, that's group B, I'm going to take you on. Now, I think the sense of combat was more on the mainstream media side, not on the new age media side. They really did not want to combat them. Well, CNN tried with CNN Plus. They shut down. So I guess they did not get the medium. The medium is that. The second point is irreverence. I think there is this mindset, right? You have to speak in a certain way. You have to look a certain way. You have to think a certain way. No, you don't have to. There are people who might be interested in a chicken feed. There might be people who might be interested in something as absurd as anything you want to think about. Why don't they have a right to express themselves? And that's what this new era has given. Yes, there is a dark side, and I agree with Abhijit, there is a dark side, but it ain't doom and gloom is what I'm trying to say. I think there's a lot of good to be offered there too. And it's like, you could today, let's say if you are in the diaspora, there is a channel called Wisdom TV. पूरा दिन उसमें क्रिकेट ही आता रहता है. अब आपको क्रिकेट देखना, आप पूरा दिन देख सकते हो. उन्होंने आपको फोर्स तो नहीं किया है ना देखने को. And the function, right? The function on which social media is based. So I remember, why do you have your refresh button from top to bottom? It is based on the Vegas slot machines, right? You do this in Vegas when you go to Vegas. They designed it so that obviously, अभी वो तो business कर रहे हैं. I mean, it's not like, tomorrow any mainstream, suddenly CNN is not going to get up. we feel really bad that you watch us for 4 hours a day. Please reduce your time and make it 2 hours a day. Nobody does that. So why is a content creator like me supposed to be, I don't know how else to say it, to be like, sir, aap mujhe zyada mat suniyega. Nobody is going to do that, right? So, and the third thing is opportunity. The next generation is about opportunity. Who would have thought? Let's talk about regional languages. India is so beautiful in the sense that we have so many regional languages, so many local stories. Would we have been in a position to do it, let's say even 20 years ago? We could not have done it. A bunch of people, I don't know how else to say it, sitting in Delhi, would have decided what everybody is going to watch. Or in the case of Hindi cinema, a bunch of people sitting in Mumbai, where I am from, will decide how you're supposed to feel about your culture. Today, you have the opportunity. I'm not talking about whether you have to be right or wrong factually. That is secondary. It's about opportunity. Today, you have a local kid sitting somewhere in remote parts of India. They have a camera, they shoot it, they have data, they upload it, and they have their own crowd. Who cares if somebody in Mumbai is interested in listening to them? This is opportunity. You create new careers, you transform lives. Now, I was an entrepreneur for a good 20 years of my life. And then I dabbled into podcasts because I loved the art. I mean, everybody says, beta, 15 minute baat karna, usse zyada nahi karna, koi sunta nahi hai. मैं 2 घंटे करता हूँ. मैंने राम माधव जी के साथ 1.5 घंटे बात की थी. लोग सुनते हैं, लोग सुनना चाहते हैं. हाँ, सब नहीं सुनना चाहते. Not everybody wants to listen to it. जिनको नहीं सुनना वो नहीं सुनेंगे. मगर यार जिनको सुनना है उनको तो opportunity दो कि कोई ऐसा मौका करे. This is what has changed. So I think it's about complementarity, irreverence, and opportunity. That's the next generation. I'll leave it at that.
Fantastic. So as a content creator, he says that it's all about opportunity. So what are your thoughts on how the media landscape is changing?
Yeah. So namaskar. I'm a filmmaker, and I had Prachyam Studios, which is a studio which is dedicated to making films only on Indic themes, Indic values, Indian culture, heritage. And so I will limit my perspective, to the world of filmmaking, whether it is fiction or non-fiction, because there's some other learned panelists here who are sharing their perspective. So before I start, may I request, may I show you just a glimpse, of our vision of, how we want to take, the cause of Bharat moving forward.
Until the lion learns to write, what you have known as Indian history is just one side of the story, edited and twisted by invaders. For the first time ever, Indic researchers unite with seasoned filmmakers to smash the biggest colonial distortions. Prachyam presents before you 10 Indic documentaries, a stunning perspective on Indian antiquity, sciences, and contributions to the world. We need your support to make this dream a reality. Our childhoods have been inspired listening to glorious stories of Bharatvarsh, times when avatars walked amongst us. But slowly and deliberately, all of it was whitewashed as mere mythology, and with it, our identity too. We were taught that there is no evidence. But what if it's right in front of our eyes and new age technology can prove it? Prachyam presents 10 Indic documentaries, a compilation of cutting-edge research that seeks the true dates of Mahabharat, Ramayana, and Indian antiquity. Your story is older than you think.
thank you. So the Alliance have learned to write, and I'm happy to share this dais with some very learned lions here. I, again, have to make just 3 points, as we are rebooting into the new meta era, into the new age media. I think, we have to analyze very closely and we have to strategize, accordingly. First thing, moving forward, we have to remember that who we are. So as we move forward, we have to take along the imprints, of our great culture, the great tradition, the great heritage along with us. And we have to remember that we belong to a very great civilization, which is the oldest in the world. And we have to remember that, for example, me, as I sit here, I don't sit as an individual here. I carry a legacy of my ancestors. And those ancestors can be traced back, to a rishi, who is my Gotru rishi. And also, as I belong to a Guru Shishya Parampara, I am also a torch bearer of the legacy of my gurus and his gurus, and that can be traced to Adi Guru. So it is very important that we keep in mind as we move forward that who we are, and that actually gives brings along a lot of responsibility on us, that how we should move forward into the new era, into this meta era. Second thing is, what are we doing? What we are going to do. We have to be very careful about what content we are going to create, what we will make, what we will churn, and what we will put out there, because it is going to stay there for posterity. And we have to keep in mind that what will be the consequences and what effect will it have on the viewers, especially on the young generations, on the young impressionable minds. We have such great stories to tell. Such great people have walked this earth. We have such great rishis, great gurus, great munis, siddhas, saints, scientists, patriots, writers. There are so many stories to tell, and India has had a great tradition of storytelling. Yesterday I was talking to Swami Mitranand, he's here, and I was so delighted to know when he shared with me that, they are going to make a film on Adi Guru Shankaracharya. I was like, full of bliss, I said, these are the stories, this country and the world is waiting to hear. So we have to keep in mind, we have to be careful about what exactly, we are going to do, what exactly we are going to create, what exactly we are going to put out there. So we have to put stories, which are truly inspiring, which are aligned, with our values, with our culture, with our civilizational roots, so that, it can inspire the coming generations and align them, for the cause of Bharat. These great people, they can be the greatest role models, for, the coming generations. So their stories need to be told. Not, the role models are not those actors, who are dancing around the trees. I mean, it's a world of illusions there. So, so we have to keep a watch, on what content. Also, we have to keep an eye, on what content is being posted out there. And if we feel that, the content is not correct, then I think, we should, speak up against it or speak about it. I would like to mention here that there have been, content, which were part of a very false propaganda, which had a very sinister design, against Bharat. And one such content was a TV series called Leela. And Ramaji is here. I don't know how many people have seen Leela, but it symbolically talks about what I felt was, the Sangh. It shows, the organization is going to come in near future, as, it's showing, as a very dystopian, future for Bharat. And, they have come in power and they are abusing the power and, doing all kind of atrocities against the people of our country. So we have to watch out for such things, And I think we have to, speak against that, And I was surprised, that, the entire series came on, a very popular OTT, and nobody spoke about it, Nobody, even from the Sangha Parivar, spoke about it. And I think, they were very successful in doing what they wanted to do, to do the subversion, of the youth and to paint, such a picture of what they wanted. So something like this, we have to, as responsible citizens, of our country and also as media professionals, we have to, watch out for these things. What is the content which is being, put out there? How it's going to affect, our coming generation, our youth? Is it not going to, distort their worldview or their perspective, of things? Finally, third point that I would like to make is that so as we move, into this meta era, we need to, protect, our mental borders. We need to align our citizens to the right perceptions. We need to set up, properly aligned film and cinema schools, because no matter what, in whichever era we go, stories will always be needed. The implementations, the execution of the stories can be modern or ultra-modern or very advanced, very sophisticated, but the stories are going to be told and stories are going to be listened by people. So we need to invest in great storytellers, because our country has had a very, very great tradition of storytelling, through ages. So keeping in mind, what will be the consequences, we have to be aware, as we move on, into the next era, that what can be the consequences of what we do. We have to protect, the young generation, the unprepared mind, who can tilt to, unfounded narratives, which can be dangerous. We have to bring about awareness in parents. They have to wake up, to the reality of the new era. And also very important is, imparting the right values to the young. Because, the media 2.0, the VR, the AR, the metaverse, they can have very destructive effect, on the young minds. So we need to prepare our education and public discourses to engage, with such issues, And we have to be aware about the intellectual warfare, because ultimately it would be more advanced, very advanced, war of narratives in the coming future. So these are the things, what I had in mind, from my perspective as a filmmaker, that I thought, I should put forth.
I think you raised two very important points. The first was on investing in, the right kind of schools, the right kind of skills. So I was looking at some studies on what would the media sector for India look like by 2047, since the PM has been talking about Amrit Kal and our vision for when India is independent India is 100 years old. So one of the studies says that India's share of the global media and entertainment sector can be at 10%. Right? To achieve that, we absolutely need to invest in the right kind of schools. And we have, as you rightly pointed out, we have a great tradition of storytelling. And I think content creation, India can definitely be the global hub for content creation. We can look at maybe more than 100 media and entertainment unicorns, which can create a market running into 50 to perhaps $75 billion. Right? And similarly, on the music side, I mean, we have such a rich tradition of musical content. And the pace at which the market for the audience for audio content, podcasts or music, growing, you're potentially looking at a global audience of 3 billion OTT listeners, and with the linguistic diversity that India has, right? It's a huge potential. So going back to his point about how do you regulate, how do you ensure that the right kind of content is out there, given the pace at which technology is changing, the pace at which new narratives are being put out there. How do you police this? How do you police this meta era?
Well, as a moral objectivist, which I am, there are objective standards, but we have to be very careful when we say we have to worry about what's going to go on there. Just to give you an example, maybe in the 1960s, what was considered fine or not so fine is considered fine today. I mean, to use the example of the moral arc. The moral arc keeps expanding. So what may have not been allowed to say 20, 30 years ago. Look at Hindi cinema. We've come a long way. How many remember, the furor on that song? What was that song called? Choli ke piche kya hai, kind of. I remember it was such a huge controversy at that time. But I could assure you today, that would not be a controversy. We have new controversies to deal with. So the point is, when we talk about policing content, first of all, we don't even understand the technology then. Okay, you can maybe shut it down to a limited audience, let's say here. You can't shut it down for the whole world, right? People are going to access it. So more than dealing with the censorship view, my is how do you create mechanisms where you can respond? I think responding is always a better way. Let people create content which maybe hurts your sentiments. It has to be there, but it's your job to respond to it. That's where the game comes. And how do you make sure, the key was what Abhijit said. Today, I myself, including Abhijit, we're both on YouTube. I'm sure Abhijit must have gotten that email too about the Russia-Ukraine crisis, where if you speak about the Russian point of view, or you are Russian adjacent or Russian sympathetic, we will demonetize your video. So what demonetization is, that you can't run ads on your video, you cannot make any kind of money on your video, and if the lords at YouTube decide, you know what, I don't like you, down you go, you get a community strike. So that is something we need to worry about. So what we can do is, maybe we force these giants, because there are network externalities, and whether we like it or not, the reason Twitter works is everybody goes there to fight. So if you create an echo chamber, it becomes boring, right? Everybody enjoys a good sparring session. That's why they're on Twitter. Basically, सबको झगड़ा करना अच्छा लगता है. So वो झगड़ा करने जाते हैं उधर. So we have to make sure that while we are fighting with each other globally on Twitter, which is far better than fighting on the streets, जो भड़ास है उधर निकाल दी, जाके आगे बढ़ गए अपनी life में फिर. The point is, how do we control them to make sure our national interest is taken, which is why I totally agree with that aspect. So you can't censor. There's just no way. You can try your best. I know people think they can, but it's not going to happen. No matter what you do, it's going to be out there. And the more you do, like the Streisand effect, right? Barbara Streisand tried to stop the photos from coming out. Nobody cared about Barbara Streisand's house. The moment she spoke about it, everybody watched it. So I think censorship usually doesn't work.
So, Mr. Chavda, you spoke about the power of the big platforms. And he raised an interesting point about, the Indic narratives. Now, one of the things that I see with all the virtual reality gaming platforms, be it Fortnite, be it, Valorant and so on, the personas are all very alien to our culture. And that is the kind of universe within which young kids today are, developing their relationships, their peer groups, their interactions. How do you see, the power of these platforms from the point of view of the cultural values and the narratives that are very subtly injected through the personas, the avatars and so on? So how do we bring in Indic elements into these platforms?
That's a very good question. So that's a very important point that you're raising, that all of our kids, everything they're exposed to is not Indian. It's alien to us. The values that we are exposed to, the kids are exposed to, are not Indian. The avatars that they are donning for themselves are not Indian. They don't represent the Indian ethnicity or anything that is Indian culture. So what's happening through social media, through all these gaming platforms, virtual reality, etc., is this. It is completing the deracination that we all have already gone through. I mean, the Indian education system is terrible. I mean, let's not mince words about that. It totally colonizes us. It alienates us from our roots. So we have all gone through it. Now our kids have the same education system, a legacy of 19th century colonialism. On top of that, all of these platforms are further deracinating them. So that is an enormous problem, and that is the problem of the metaverse. It's immersive, you're totally into it, and that's the universe you prefer to inhabit. So what is the solution to this? We need our own platforms. We need our own creative developers. To paraphrase Karl Marx, we need to own and control the means of production and distribution of these technologies. That's what needs to happen. And we haven't even started that. So that would take a 20-year development cycle if we start today. So in the interim, what we can do is we could pass some sort, we need oversight and regulation of some kind. The platforms, they don't belong to us. These are American platforms. So they're going to set the rules, and we're going to have to comply. The best option we have is compliance. They don't even recognize the authority of the Indian government. We have seen that on multiple occasions. So we need some sort of regulatory mechanism in the interim until we can hopefully develop our own platforms. So that's what can happen. And of course, on these foreign platforms, if we can have our own developers who create Indian-themed games or whatever it is, then that would be great, because there is so much richness, like Praveenji said, in our culture, in our stories. So we could bring that forth in various RPGs, role-playing games or whatever. So that would help our kids reconnect themselves or anchor themselves into Indian culture, because, I mean, that makes sense. So these are some of the things we could explore, but it is clearly a very big problem, and right now we don't have the solutions implemented.
Yes, I will just like to add, one thing. I did not say, about policing, the content, I even did not talk about a censorship, on various platforms, But we have to understand, that we have to draw a line, under the garb of freedom of expression. We cannot have anything, which can be opened widely, to the viewers here in our country. And as I quoted, the example of Leela, I did not say that it should have been censored. I said, when we saw it, being openly broadcasted there, we should have, spoken about it. We should have done something. There should be any regulatory body in the government. We should keep an eye on these things, and we should have, called out, and said something about it, This is what I'm saying,
So one of the, I think the fundamental challenges for regulation or any regulatory authority in this fast evolving landscape is going to be about the algorithms that run these platforms and the opacity of these algorithms. So any thoughts, any one of you, on how can we address that?
Well, we need to break their algorithmic monopoly by making or forcing them. First of all, we have to tell them to get their servers in our country, right? They don't even have their servers in India. They play with our data. And then as far as the algorithm is concerned, I think that's an intellectual property issue too, because like everybody seems to claim. In fact, even yesterday, when I was speaking with Harsh and Rajiv, I did talk about Jonathan Haidt's study on Instagram, for example, how Instagram has created a problem where suicide rates amongst teenage girls has increased. So these are issues, and these are driven by the design of the algorithm itself. Or what I guess they have to do is, if not to everybody, at least to the governments of the day, they have to share their algorithmic working, where they tell them, okay, this is what we're doing. Look, everybody over here, if they go against what is the so-called big tech view, you know your content is going to be put down. We just know that. Everybody knows if you say, let's say a year and a half ago, the lab leak theory, right? If you spoke about the lab leak theory, they don't like it, they are going to shut you down. But how do they? It's not like they're going out, tu kya bol raha hai, kind of. It's a method. Now, what we need is that maybe the government needs to tell them, you need to show us that. We are the regulator, you show us. They don't need to show it to me. मुझे दिखाएंगे भी तो मुझे कुछ समझ नहीं पड़ेगा. वो अलग बात है. But at least the governments in power should know how the algorithm works, where it goes. Recently, Project Veritas did a sting operation on a Twitter employee, and it should scare us. When the Twitter employee says, we don't like the word prophet, and we just don't like right wing, the person is openly saying that. Now, how do they manage? It's not like some overlord is sitting over there, you individual Twitter handle, bumped off. They don't do that. It functions. So the governments need to make these companies and share their platform working, algorithm with them. And the governments have to know. I don't know when it will happen and why it will happen, but I guess that's a very valid concern.
One point before we open it up to the audience for questions. So I think coming back to your thing about investing in schools and skills. What are your challenges that you see as a content creator in getting the right talent and building the right skills so that more and more of this content is created?
Yeah. So well, I studied filmmaking in US, and well, I saw there that in almost all the major universities in US, you had a cinema school, and very, very well-equipped cinema school. And some of them, you had a very good tie-up with the Hollywood main industry, Coming back, to Bharat, I always found, that we have such, talented people, such great potential, such great tradition of storytelling. But we don't have enough cinema schools, film and television schools, media schools, to groom, that talent, to polish that talent, We have a very good film institute, but it is hijacked, by the communist and the leftist, So, we can't make it very productive, The private schools are not really up to the mark. So I think, there is a challenge, a bit of challenge there. But I think, the UGC and the government, should sit together, at least in the major universities. They should have now, the cinema schools, the film and television training institutes, where they can have, very good programs running into how to train people to become, great storytellers, great filmmakers, great media person, with the latest of the technology, which is in the world, on which the world is operating, get that technology on board, and in each and every aspect, of the craft, they should be, properly trained. And most importantly, apart from training, what I believe in is, they should be rightly aligned for the cause of Bharat. The Leela was made, by an Indian director, using the Indian actors, by the funds, of some foreign institutions, which was speaking about against Bharat, against Sangh, against our values, against our symbolism, and we did not do anything about that. So aligning the youth, with the right perspective of life and with the right values, along with the training that we impart on them, is very, very important.
So with that, let's open it up if anyone has a question. Yeah, please.
Hi, good morning.
Yeah.
Thank you for an excellent panel. My question is to Praveenji. I was a professor not so many years ago, and now even the students believe that the education that we're offering, they're consuming a product. अगर कोई एक दवाई होती जिसे खिला देते और हम सब सेवा भाव से भर जाते and we all became nationalistic, I'd be the happiest person on the planet. My question to you is, because China did a job and they have a different model where even the expats outside would contribute to nation building. And you mentioned schools and you mentioned storytelling. I've been a filmmaker by profession. How do you first address, let's say, behavior change communication? And we're in working towards Amrit Kal, right? And the entire idea is to bring about a discourse of nationalism where you feel proud to belong to the country. And this is a very important question because you're a phenomenal storyteller, so I'd love to hear more from you on that.
That's a very good question, and this is what I've been trying to do, with our studio and with our films, just to try to fill up the gap, that gap which has been created, by not a very efficient education system in our country over decades. It should have been done there, where education system in itself should have, imparted great values, would have, built up characters, would have, given that sense of nationalism to the young generation. Unfortunately, it could not do it completely. Maybe partly it did, But I think, some great Dharam Gurus are sitting here. I think where we lost it was, we had this greatest of parampara, the greatest of tradition, which was the Guru Shishya parampara, I think, that we all collectively, and also there should be, a government initiative in this direction, that, the Guru Shishya parampara, should be restored first in order to, build up that character, to instill that sense of nationalism, to give them that pride, and the most important thing is the right perspective of life, to look at things, with the right perspective, what is right and what is not right, people, the youth, maybe is lacking there, So that is very, very important. So the right education model, the Guru Shishya parampara, along with that, all the modern ways of education, training, cinema schools, greatest of the laboratories, studios, and all that, I think we will be able to do that,
Madam, you had a question.
Yes.
The lady there, then we'll come.
Yeah, good morning. So my question is, all of you said social media brought level playing field. Everybody can aid their opinions. But what I feel is, this is too much. The data is too much. And where is the time for a child, or any child, to sit and contemplate some of the things? How much is too much in the data, this thing? And then what I think is, after a few years, people will filter their own things, whatever they want, they see, and they'll end it, I think. What is your opinion on that? Because thinking process is gone and contemplation is gone among the kids by seeing this.
Absolutely. I think you're making a very important point, because I noticed in the last 2 years with COVID, the students, the kids being at home, they watch the educational videos at 2x speed. I don't know, how do you absorb content at 2x speed? You want to respond?
Well, I can only say one thing. Social media is an experiment we did not sign up for, but we are volunteering anyways.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, myself, Ranjit Agarwal. My question to Shashi ji. Sir, when a film is an adult, age certification is given. But when the web series are exposed to every child, every home in this country, and the use of the slang language is rampant. And even my 10-year-old son has seen one web series, and he was asking, sir, what is the meaning of this MC word? So how do we want to regulate as a government, or whether in a meta era, we want to have everything exposed to everybody, we have no control? Are we surrendering to this meta era in the near future?
So I can't speak for the government because I'm the public broadcaster, but I can share some developments, because recently the government has notified the digital media regulation rules. Earlier, this was not even regulated. It was free for all. Now, at least there is a framework. There is a multiple tier system where there is self-regulation at the first year. You can go and complain there. And if still things don't get resolved, then it gets referred at the next level to an appellate body and then to the government itself. So there is a framework in place now, and we are, I think, beginning to see that its impact, especially on anti-national activities, YouTube channels, Twitter handles, which are putting out propaganda. All of that is getting regulated. You raise a very important point, and personally, again, I'm not speaking as a public representative here, but personally, I feel that there is a possibility for the rules to specify that, you know, what kind of content each web series, for example, has, which are how many scenes which are, you know, not appropriate for children. Today, if you go to IMDb database, you can pretty much get that, you know, how many, you know, scenes of inappropriate content, how many scenes of violence. So based on that information, you can make the choice whether your kids are seeing it or not. Again, this is not like TV, right? It is subscription-based. You have the control in your hands. So I think the technology exists, the reference models exist, the rules are in place. I think it will get solved. Anyone want to add in it?
Well, I think, you know, what you're saying is absolutely right, you know, but what I just have to add here is, you know, whatever is being shown, you know, to any viewer, whether it is young or old or the young generation or the youth in this country, you know, we should have some kind of, you know, vetting system, you know, for that, you know. It should definitely be regulated. It cannot be free for all, whoever wants to come and show anything. You know, we as a society, you know, should understand, you know, what can be the consequences of having this open air for all kind of, you know, media or OTT platforms.
Yeah.
My question is to Praveen ji. Hello, sir. My name is Dr. Lakshmi Nasman. I'm from Mysore. So you mentioned the Leela web series on Netflix and how it showed a lot of anti-India, anti-Sangh, anti-one community content. So I believe the solution is to make better videos from our point of view. Censorship is not going to work, as we all discussed. The way out is to make counter videos to that. But unfortunately, we are not seeing quality. We are seeing some just WhatsApp forward, small YouTube videos, but high quality content to counter the propaganda, so-called videos on the other side, that has to come. High quality web series on select topics. So why is it not coming? I mean, your initiative is great.
I think he said that, right? We need more schools, more content creators. I think we need...
And one more second question I had was...
Can we take a question here because we are out of time?
How do you, like your videos, I wanted that it has to be shown widely in all schools, like your documentaries and all. So it's okay if a small select audience like this but how to make it more widespread so that all children of India watch it in all languages? So that's something.
Well, that's a very good suggestion. You know, we would like to work with government and NCERT, you know, if they can make, you know, these videos as part of the curriculum which can be shown to the students. And maybe Ramaji can help us with that, you know.
Sir, your question. And then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, thank you so much. What a fascinating discussion. My question is, you know, this is an era of narratives. And there are fake narratives are like an organized crime. And by the time you react, it's already too late and has done the damage. So how do you contain it? Secondly, in the meta era, do you still perceive the media to be the fourth estate or the fifth columnist or an overlord?
Chowda, you want to?
So in the meta era, the media, so we have been taught this wonderful romantic notion that the media is the fourth pillar of democracy and all that. It's never really been that way. It's always it's always had financial interests and geopolitical and influence interests. Now in the meta era, the thing is that the legacy media is no longer relevant as far as small kids are concerned, teenagers are concerned, and they are the future of the world. In 10, 20 years, they're going to be driving the world, the engine of the world, and we will soon be irrelevant. So from their perspective, the legacy media, the mainstream media that we have today is no longer relevant. And therefore, it is not the fourth estate or anything. It is whatever it can be. It is essentially an influence operation. It can influence people in any way you want, especially when you have the algorithms that have cracked the human code, the psyche of the human being. And every person generates a lot of metadata. So they actually have the data for each person. For each person, they have the data points that tell you what sort of psychology the person has. So you can tailor content specifically for a person. So that is the challenge we are facing in the meta era. And it is a problem that we don't have a solution to right now. The algorithms are opaque. And governments, even if they impose regulations, the big data companies may not comply with that. They are too big now. They are bigger than many governments. I mean, if you look at the valuation of some countries, some companies, they are much bigger than the valuation of many countries, the GDP of many countries. So that is a problem we are going to face. Sovereignty is an issue, and compliance is an issue. So I don't see a solution right now. I mean, all of this content that is available on YouTube or wherever, it is permissionless content. You don't need someone's permission to create the content and put it up. It's there. And then it is for viewers whether they want to see it or not, depending on how well it is made or not. So these are issues that exist, and that's going to be the problem going forward. And we need proactive solutions for that. So we may need some preemptive legislation and make these companies comply with that. And eventually, in the long run, we need to create our own platforms and content. So that's where we need to be.
Great.
Hi, just one quick question.
We are out of time. I think we'll have to wrap up. One last question.
Yeah, thanks.
Can I ask the question? I'm Vidyadhara here.
So my name is Kshitij. Hi, Kushal, this question is for you. And this ties in with a lot of things. With YouTube and all these OTTs coming up, the bigger problem that's for all content creators is no matter how good contemplative counter content you produce, the views are really stuck based on the clickbaitness of the thumbnail and some durations and this and that. So if we have to counter with a lot of counter content to propaganda, how do you see this without a good design education, without good knowledge of clickbait or marketing principles? Where do you see as getting more? Are we getting more viewership on these platforms?
Be patient.
Okay.
I'm patient. I started off 5 years ago. Barely anyone used to listen to me. Now they do. I just was patient. I still don't do clickbait. I have a policy. Anybody who follows my podcast knows I don't do clickbait. I have a policy of no clickbait. You work hard, you create content. Don't think about anything else. You just have to be patient. The problem is we're not patient enough.
Great. On that note, thank you all.
I have one question.
No, I think we are out of time. Okay. So we'll maybe take it offline. Yeah, thanks to all the panelists. I think it was a great session.
Thank you, sir, for a thought-provoking session. A big round of applause, please. May I request our chair, Dr. Shashi Shekhar, to kindly felicitate the panel. May I request Dr. Chandra Wadhwa of India Foundation to kindly felicitate our chair for this panel. Thank you, sir. We will begin right away. Please hang on.
Good morning, friends. Good to see you again. Welcome to the final day